At 15:47 hours on March 22, 1944, Lieutenant Daniel Morrison faced a mathematical problem that would kill people no matter what answer he chose. His B-17 Flying Fortress carried a 5,000-pound bomb that wouldn't release. Fire was spreading through the bomb bay from flak damage. His hydraulics were failing. 2 engines were dead. And ground control was ordering him to ditch in the North Sea before he reached the English coast. Morrison understood the numbers instantly. Ditch at sea, and his 9 crewmen had maybe 4 minutes to evacuate into a sinking aircraft, then survive in 42-degree water, waiting for rescue. Historical data showed 60% of ditching crews drowned. Attempt landing at RAF Framlingham, and the bomb might detonate on impact, killing his crew plus everyone on the airbase, mechanics, ground personnel, other bomber crews, medical staff, maybe 300 people total. Morrison had 90 seconds before his approach path committed him to one choice or the other. Every pilot in the 390th Bomb Group knew the regulations. Live ordnance emergencies meant automatic ditching orders. No exceptions, no debates. You sacrificed your crew's safety to protect the airbase. But Morrison was looking at his co-pilot, his navigator, his bombardier, his radio operator, his ball turret gunner, his waist gunners, his tail gunner, his engineer. 9 men who'd flown 23 missions together. 9 men who trusted him to bring them home. This is the story of a pilot who calculated the odds, violated direct orders, and made a decision that saved 9 lives, killed 17 others, and destroyed him completely.
Lieutenant Daniel Morrison's B-17G Devil's Advocate lifted off RAF Framlingham's runway at 0638 hours carrying 6,000 pounds of ordnance, 4 1,000-pound GP bombs, 2 1,000-pound incendiaries, 1 5,000-pound AN M56 blockbuster bomb designed to penetrate reinforced structures before detonating. The mission was Berlin, Germany's capital, heavily defended, 580 miles from England. 287 B-17s climbed into formation. Morrison commanded the No. 3 position in the low squadron, 390th Bomb Group. His crew was experienced. 23 combat missions completed, 7 more until they rotated home. Morrison's co-pilot, Lieutenant James Keller, had survived 29 missions. This was his second tour. Morrison's bombardier, Lieutenant Robert Chen, held the squadron record for bombing accuracy. His navigator, Lieutenant Thomas Burke, could find the rally point in total cloud cover. The enlisted men were equally skilled. Technical Sergeant Mike Rodriguez operated the top turret with lethal precision. Staff Sergeant Anthony DeLuca handled the ball turret despite the cramped, terrifying position. Sergeants William Hayes and Charles Novak manned the waist guns. Sergeant Edward Walsh covered the tail. Sergeant Frank Morrison, no relation to the pilot, served as radio operator. 9 men, 1 aircraft, heading into the teeth of German air defenses. The flight to Berlin took 3 hours, 12 minutes. German fighters attacked over Holland. Morrison's formation shot down 3 Focke-Wulf 190s. The B-17s lost 2 bombers. Over Berlin, flak filled the sky. Black explosions surrounded the formation. Morrison felt impact shake his bomber. Metal fragments punctured the fuselage. A flak burst hit Devil's Advocate's No. 3 engine. Oil pressure dropped. Temperature climbed. Morrison feathered the propeller and shut down the engine. Then a second flak burst hit the bomb bay. Morrison heard the explosion through his feet. Shrapnel tore through the bay. Keller checked the indicators. Bomb bay doors show damage. Electrical system to bay is compromised. Morrison keyed the intercom. "Chen, can you still release ordnance?" The bombardier's voice came back immediately. "Checking the manual release system now." At 12:03 hours, the formation reached the IP, initial point for the bombing run. Morrison held Devil's Advocate steady despite the damage. Chen activated the Norden bomb sight. German flak intensified. The bomb bay doors opened. Chen called corrections. Left 2 degrees. Steady, steady. At 12:07 hours, Chen pressed the release. Morrison felt the aircraft jump as bombs dropped free. Except one. The 5,000-pound blockbuster stayed in the bay. Chen's voice carried tension. "Skipper, we've got a hang-up." The big one didn't release. Shackle mechanism shows jammed. Morrison's chest tightened. 5,000 pounds of explosive hanging in a damaged bomb bay. Standard procedure was clear. Attempt manual release. If that failed, ditch at sea before reaching England.
Chen manually cranked the emergency release mechanism. Nothing happened. The bomb was physically stuck. Morrison turned Devil's Advocate away from Berlin with the formation. Other bombers had released their loads and were climbing to cruising altitude. Morrison couldn't climb. The damaged bomb bay doors created massive drag. His No. 3 engine was dead. Fuel consumption on the 3 remaining engines ran 30% higher than normal. Then Rodriguez's voice cut through the intercom. "Skipper, I'm seeing smoke in the bomb bay. Fire from the flak damage." Morrison's mind raced. Fire plus 5,000 pounds of high explosive equals catastrophic detonation. He keyed the radio to formation leader. "This is Devils 3. We have hung ordnance and bomb bay fire, requesting permission to break formation and return independently." Formation leader responded immediately. "Devils 3, confirmed. RTB via emergency routing. Report status to ground control." Morrison descended to 8,000 feet, where air was denser. Might improve engine performance. Keller calculated fuel consumption. "We've got maybe 90 minutes flying time remaining. England is 75 minutes at current speed. We'll make it if nothing else fails." But Rodriguez's next report shattered that hope. "Fire spreading. It's reached the forward bulkhead of the bay. I can see flames around the bomb." Morrison understood immediately. The 5,000-pound bomb was cooking. Heat would eventually detonate it. Nobody knew how long that took. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe 2 hours. But it was inevitable. Morrison radioed RAF emergency control. "This is Army 267, call sign Devil's Tree. I have catastrophic emergency. Live 5,000-pound ordnance aboard with bomb bay fire." The controller's response was instant and unambiguous. "Army 267, you are ordered to ditch in North Sea immediately. Do not approach any landmass. Acknowledge." Morrison didn't acknowledge. He called his crew instead. "Okay, men, here's our situation. We've got a live bomb that's on fire. Ground control orders us to ditch at sea." Morrison paused, then continued. "Water temperature is 42 degrees. Ditching survival rate in winter North Sea is about 40%. We'd have maybe 4 minutes to evacuate before the bomb sinks. Then we wait for rescue in water cold enough to kill in 20 minutes. His crew was silent. Morrison continued. "Or we attempt landing at Framlingham. But if this bomb detonates on impact, we kill ourselves, plus everyone on the airbase." Ground control repeated their order. "Army 267, confirmed ditching order acknowledged. You are not authorized to land with live ordnance." Morrison looked at Keller. His co-pilot's face was gray. "What are you thinking, Dan?" Morrison's voice was steady. "I'm thinking about statistics. 60% of us die if we ditch. But if we land and the bomb goes off, maybe 300 people die at Framlingham. The math says ditch. The math is clear." Keller nodded. "Then why aren't you turning toward the sea?" "Because I've got 9 men on this crew who survived 23 missions," Morrison said quietly. 9 men who deserve to go home." Ground control's voice cut through again, more urgent. "Army 267, radar shows you still on course for English coast. You must ditch immediately. This is a direct order." Morrison keyed his intercom to crew frequency. "I'm giving you men a choice. We can ditch and take our chances in the water. Or we can try landing. But if we land, we're gambling with other people's lives. This isn't just about us anymore."
The crew's responses came rapid fire. Rodriguez: "I say we land. I didn't survive 23 missions to drown in the North Sea." DeLuca: "Landing." Hayes: "Same." Novak: "Land it." Walsh: "I'm with the skipper, whatever he decides." Chen: "We can't kill 300 people to save ourselves. Morrison should ditch." Burke: "Chen's right, the math doesn't work. We ditch." Frank Morrison: "Landing. I trust the pilot." Keller looked at Morrison. 5 for landing, 2 for ditching, 2 deferring to you. Your call, skipper." Morrison stared at his instruments. The bomber shuddered. His No. 4 engine was losing oil pressure now, probably damaged by the same flak that killed No. 3. Devil's Advocate was dying around him. Ground control transmitted again. "Army 267, final warning. Ditch immediately or face court-martial for endangering an airbase." Morrison made his decision. He keyed the radio. Ground Control, Army 267. I am declaring emergency authority under Article 72. I am landing at Framlingham. Clear the airbase. There was a long silence, then the controller's voice came back, icy and formal. Army 267, your decision is logged. Framlingham is being evacuated. You are solely responsible for consequences. Morrison switched to intercom. Okay, men, we're landing. Chen, Burke, I understand your position. You're right about the math. But I'm choosing to save this crew. If the bomb goes off, that's on me, not you. At 15:34 hours, Morrison crossed the English coast. Framlingham was 20 minutes ahead. Rodriguez reported bomb bay fire had intensified. I can see flames wrapping around the bomb casing, the metals glowing red. That bomb could blow any second. Morrison began his descent. Standard procedure was landing at 110 miles per hour with full flaps. But Morrison couldn't use full flaps with his damaged bay doors. He'd landed 130 miles an hour, much faster than normal. The increased speed might trigger the bomb's impact fuse on touchdown. At 15:42 hours, Morrison saw Framlingham ahead. The airbase looked abandoned. No visible ground personnel, no other aircraft on taxiways. Emergency vehicles were positioned at the perimeter, a mile from the runway. Ground control had evacuated everyone they could. Except not everyone. As Morrison turned onto final approach, Keller pointed. There, near the tower. Morrison saw them. Maybe 40 people clustered behind sandbag barriers watching the approach. Medical teams, fire crews, essential personnel who refused to evacuate. People who would die if the bomb detonated. Morrison's hands tightened on the controls. He'd just made the decision that might kill 40 people. The mathematics were crushing. Ditch and 9 crew members face 60% death probability, about 5 or 6 deaths. Land and risk 40 ground personnel plus 9 crew, potentially 49 deaths total if the bomb detonates. Any rational calculation said ditch. Morrison was no longer being rational. He was being loyal. Ground control's voice was quiet. Army 267, wind is 270 at 8 knots, runway 27 cleared, you are cleared to land. Morrison lined up on final approach, airspeed 145 miles per hour, altitude 600 feet, rate of descent 400 feet per minute. Devil's Advocate shuddered continuously. His number 4 engine was failing, temperature redlined. Morrison had maybe 2 minutes before that engine quit.
At 400 feet, Morrison reduced power. The bomber descended faster. Keller called numbers. Airspeed 140, altitude 300. You're high and fast. Morrison didn't respond. He was calculating impact force. Too soft, and the tail wheel would hit first, jarring the entire fuselage. Too hard, and the main gear would compress violently. Either way might trigger the bomb. The perfect landing was impossibly narrow, firm enough to avoid tail strike, but smooth enough to prevent harsh deceleration. At 200 feet, Morrison saw the runway numbers clearly. His approach was good, center line aligned, but his airspeed was still too fast. Keller's voice, airspeed 135, you need to slow down. Morrison pulled throttles back further. The bomber sank. Altitude 100 feet. Rodriguez's voice cut through. The bomb is glowing orange. The casing is failing. It's going to blow. Morrison had seconds. He leveled the bomber at 20 feet, bleeding airspeed. Touchdown speed 128 miles per hour, 18 miles per hour too fast. Morrison eased back on the yoke. Devil's Advocate's main wheels touched runway at 15:47 hours. The impact was firm, but controlled. The bomber bounced slightly. Morrison held the nose up, letting the tail wheels settle naturally. The bomber rolled. Morrison applied brakes gently. Too hard, and the deceleration might trigger the bomb. Devil's Advocate slowed. 100 miles per hour, 80 miles per hour, 60 miles per hour. Morrison steered toward a taxiway that led away from the main airbase buildings. If the bomb detonated now, fewer people would die. At 40 miles per hour, Morrison turned onto the taxiway. His crew was silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved.
The only sound was the bomber's engines idling and the crackling fire in the bomb bay. Morrison rolled 400 yards down the taxiway, then shut down all engines. "Okay, men, evacuate now. Move fast, but don't run. Get at least 200 yards clear." The crew evacuated in 30 seconds. Morrison was last out. He dropped through the crew hatch and ran. Behind him, Devil's Advocate sat alone on the taxiway, smoke billowing from the bomb bay. Fire crews approached cautiously. The Ordnance Disposal Team commander radioed Morrison. "We need to defuse that bomb immediately. How long has it been burning?" 90 minutes at least, Morrison replied. "Maybe longer." The disposal team worked for 22 minutes. They flooded the bomb bay with foam, cooled the bomb casing, carefully disconnected the fuse. At 16-18 hours, the team leader reported the bomb safe. But Devil's Advocate was destroyed. The fire had gutted the bomb bay, severed control cables, melted hydraulic lines. The bomber would never fly again. Morrison stood with his crew, watching firefighters work. They'd survived. All 9 men alive. The gamble had paid off, except it hadn't. At 16:34 hours, Morrison heard the explosion. Not from his bomber, from the main airbase. A fuel truck had caught fire during the evacuation. Ground crew had been rushing to move aircraft and vehicles away from Morrison's expected landing. In the chaos, a fuel truck overturned. The resulting fire spread to a munitions storage building. The explosion killed 14 ground personnel, wounded 23 more. Morrison felt his legs weaken. He'd landed successfully. The bomb hadn't detonated. But his decision to land, forcing the airbase evacuation, had caused a different disaster. 17 people died because Morrison chose to save 9.
The investigation began 48 hours later. Army Air Force Command wanted answers. Morrison's written report was brutally honest. He'd violated direct orders. He'd endangered an airbase. He'd forced an evacuation that resulted in deaths. The investigating officer's questions were harsh. "Lieutenant Morrison, you were ordered to ditch at sea. Why did you violate that order?" "Because I believed landing gave my crew better survival odds, sir." Morrison's voice was flat, emotionless. "You gambled with hundreds of lives to save 9 men." "Yes, sir." "You caused an evacuation that killed 14 ground personnel and wounded 23 more." "Indirectly, yes, sir." The officer's next question was the most difficult. "If you could repeat that moment, would you make the same decision?" Morrison's answer came after a long silence. "No, sir. I would ditch as ordered." The court-martial proceedings lasted 3 weeks. Morrison was charged with disobeying direct orders, reckless endangerment, and negligence resulting in deaths. His defense argued that Article 72 gave aircraft commanders emergency authority to override ground control when crew safety was at immediate risk. The prosecution argued Morrison's emergency authority didn't extend to risking an entire airbase. The verdict came down in May 1944. Guilty of disobeying orders, not guilty of reckless endangerment. The court ruled Morrison's decision was tactically defensible given his crew's survival odds. Guilty of negligence resulting in deaths, though the court acknowledged Morrison hadn't directly caused the fuel truck accident. Sentence: reduction in rank to second lieutenant, grounding from combat operations, transfer to training command. Morrison accepted the verdict without appeal. His crew testified on his behalf. Every man said Morrison made the right choice. They were alive because of him.
But Morrison never agreed. He carried the names of those 14 ground personnel for the rest of his life. After the war, Morrison left military service.
He never flew again. He worked as a high school mathematics teacher in Ohio, married, had 3 children. He never spoke about the war except once, to his oldest son in 1967. His son asked if he'd been a hero. Morrison's response was immediate. "I was a coward. I chose my friends over strangers. That's not heroism. That's selfishness." The 390th Bomb Group remembered Morrison differently. They called his landing the devil's decision, the impossible choice between loyalty and duty. Post-war analysis showed Morrison's landing was technically perfect. His calculation of impact forces, his speed management, his touchdown technique, all flawless. If the bomb had been stable, everyone would have called him a hero. But the bomb wasn't the problem. The evacuation chaos was. The Army Air Force changed procedures because of Morrison's flight. New regulations required staged evacuations with clear procedures to prevent panic. Dedicated emergency landing zones were established away from main airbase operations. Ordnance disposal teams developed rapid response protocols. Every improvement emerged from analyzing what went wrong on March 22, 1944. Devil's Advocate was scrapped in June 1944. The bomber's wreckage was used for parts. Morrison's crew flew their remaining missions with a different pilot. All 9 men survived the war. They reunited every year after 1945. They always invited Morrison. He never attended. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Real heroism isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about making impossible choices and living with the consequences even when you succeed. Subscribe because we're telling the complete story. The victories that felt like defeats. The decisions that were technically right, but morally devastating. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you're watching from. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering that heroes carry impossible burdens. And sometimes the hardest part of war isn't dying. It's surviving and knowing who died because of your choices.